Welcome to my dear students. Today's deliberation is about dividend policies, theories and decisions. This particular unit is coming under fourth unit of Become sixth semester CBCS syllabus. So first we will start from the introduction. The term dividend refers to that part of profits of a company which is distributed by the company among its shareholders. It is the reward of the shareholders for investments made by them in the shares of the company. The investors are interested in earning the maximum return on their investment and to maximize their wealth. A company, on the other hand, needs to provide funds to finance its long term growth. If a company pays out as dividend most of what it earns, then for business requirements and further expansion, it will have to depend upon outside resources such as issue of debt or new shares. Dividend policy of a firm thus affects both the long-term financing and the wealth of shareholders. So this is called dividend policies, or what is actually dividend. So dividend actually it is the reward to the shareholders. It is the part of profits that is distributed among the shareholders by the company. It is the reward to the shareholders for their investments made. Investors are interested in earning the maximum return on their shares of the company to maximize their wealth as in the form of dividends only. So dividend decisions and value of the firm. The value of the firm can be maximized if shareholders' wealth is maximized. Okay, if shareholders' wealth are maximized, automatically our value of the firm will also maximize. There are conflicting views regarding the impact of dividend decisions on the valuation of the firm. According to one school of thought, dividend decision doesn't affect the shareholders' wealth and hence the valuation of the firm. On the other hand, according to other school of thought, dividend decision materially affects the shareholders' wealth and also the valuation of the firm. We will discuss the views of two schools of thoughts under two groups. Means dividend decisions and the value of the firms are to be categorized and classified in two schools of thoughts. One is theory of irrelevance, or the irrelevance concept of dividend. This is the first category. And the second category is the theory of relevance, that is the relevance concept of dividend. So we will start from the irrelevance concept of dividend, or the theory of irrelevance. And from this particular concept of dividend or theory of irrelevance, it is also having two approaches. One is residual approach and another one is Modigliani and Miller approach. So first we start with residual approach. According to this theory, dividend decision has no effect on the wealth of the shareholders or the prices of the shares, and hence it is irrelevant so far as the valuation of the firm is concerned. This theory regards dividend decision merely as a part of financing decisions because the earnings available may be retained in the business for reinvestment, but if the funds are not required in the business, they may be distributed as dividends. This theory assumes that investors do not differentiate between dividends and retentions by the firm. Their basic desire is to earn higher return on their investment. In case the firm has profitable investment opportunities giving a higher rate of return than the cost of retained earnings, the investors would be content with the firm retaining the earnings to finance the same. However, if the firm is not in a position to find profitable investment opportunities, the investors would prefer to receive the earnings in the form of dividends. So, a firm should retain the earnings if it has profitable investment opportunities. Otherwise, it should be pay them as dividends. Means on the residual approaches, basically the firm's view, it is the theory regards dividend decision as a part of merely financial decisions because whatever earnings are available near the company that may be retained in the business for reinvestment. But if the funds are not required in the businesses, then the business can be distributed that earnings among the shareholders in the form of dividends. So the basic desire is to earn higher rate of return on their investment by the shareholders. So in the case of farm as profitable investment opportunities giving a higher rate of return than the cost of retained earnings, the investor should be content with the farm retaining the earnings to the finance the same, and the farm should retain the earnings if it has profitable investment opportunities. Otherwise, the farm can distribute the earnings among the shareholders. So this is all about your residual approach. Now coming to Modigliani and Miller approach, shortly known as MM model. Modigliani and Miller have expressed in the most comprehensive manner in support of the theory of irrelevance. They maintain that dividend policy has no effect on market price of the shares, and the value of the firm is determined by the earning capacity of the firm or its investment policy. The splitting of earnings between retentions and dividends may be in any manner of the firm likes doesn't affect the value of the firm. As observed by Modigliani and Miller, under conditions of perfect capital market, rational investors, absence of tax discriminations between dividend income and capital appreciations, given the firm's investment policy, its dividend policy may have no influence on market price of the shares. So this is what actually Modigliani and Miller approach says. So basically there are some assumptions of M and M hypothesis. First assumption, there are perfect capital markets. Investors, number two, investors behave rationally. Number three, information about the company is available to all without any cost. Number four, there are no flotation and transaction costs. Number five, no investor is large enough to affect the market price of shares. Number six, there are no taxes or there are no differences in taxes applicable to dividends and capital gains. Number seven, the firm has a rigid investment policies. So these are the various assumptions we must have to be followed while dealing with Modigliani and Miller approaches. But there are some argument of Modigliani and Miller also. The argument given by Modigliani and Miller in support of their hypothesis is that whatever increases in the value of the firm results from the payment of dividends will be exactly offset by the decline in the market price of the shares because of external financing, and there will be no change in the total wealth of the shareholders. For example, if a company having investment opportunities distributes all its earnings among the shareholders, it will have to raise additional funds from external sources. This will result in the increase in number of shares or payment of interest charges, resulting in fail in the earnings per share in the future. So, whatever a shareholders gains on account of dividend payment is neutralized completely by the fail in the market price of the shares due to decline in expected future earnings per share. To be more specific, the market price of a share in the beginning of a period is equal to the present value of dividends paid at the end of the period plus the market price of the shares at the end of the period. This can be put into the following formula as under Modigliani and Wheeler hypothesis arguments, we can conclude that we have to find out market price per share at the beginning of the period by applying the following formula as by taking into consideration of dividend to be received at the end of the period and market price per share at the end of the period, and including the cost of equity capital or equity capitalization rate by applying the following formula, which is P0 equals to D1 plus P1 whole divided by 1 plus K, where P0 equals to market price per share at the beginning of the period, D1 equals to dividend to be received at the end of the period, P1 equals to market price per share at the end of the period, while K is stands for cost of equity capital or equity capitalization rate. And similarly, out of this particular formula, we have to also derive one particular formula, that is market price per share at the end of the period will be P1 equals to P0 whole into 1 plus K minus D1. So the MM hypothesis can be explained in another form, also presuming that investment required by the firm on account of payment of dividends is financed out of the new issue of shares. In such a case, if the number of shares to be issued can be computed with the following formula, that small m equals to I whole into E minus n d1 by p1. We have to calculate the number of equity shares issued, and further the value of the firm can be ascertained by using the following formula, as np0 stands for value of the firm at the beginning will be small n plus small m whole into p1 minus I minus E whole divided by 1 plus k. This particular formula is also given in your book. You should go through your book properly. After seeing this particular video, every videos, you should compare the video with your textbooks. Okay, then only it will be very much clear with the respective formula is applicable in financial management. You should have continuously cover up these portions with your textbooks. So here, small m equals to number of shares to be issued, capital I equals to investment required, capital E equals to total earnings of the firm during the period, P1 equals to market price per share at the end of the period, KE stands for cost of equity capital, small n equals to number of shares outstanding at the beginning of the period, D1 equals to dividend to be paid at the end of the period, and NP0 equals to value of the firm. So this is all about your Modigliani and Miller approach under theory of irrelevance. Now coming to the second broad category, which is theory of relevance. Before starting theory of irrelevance, there are some criticism of M and M approaches. One is perfect capital market doesn't exist in reality. Information about the company is not available to all the persons. Third, the firm have to incur flotation costs while issuing securities. Number four, taxes do exist and there is normally different tax treatment for dividends and capital gains. Number five, the firm do not follow a rigid investment policy. Number six, the investors have to pay brokerage fees, etc. while doing any transaction. Number seven, shareholders may prefer current income as compared to further gains. So these are all about some criticisms of Modigliani and Miller hypothesis. Now coming to our next broad category, theory of relevance, that is the relevance concept of dividend. So the other school of thought on dividend decision holds that the dividend decision considerably affect the value of the firm. The advocates of this school of thought include Myron Gordon, James Walter, and Richardson. According to them, dividends communicate information to the investors about the firm's profitability, and hence dividend decision becomes relevant. Those firms which pay higher dividends will have greater value as compared to those which do not pay dividends or have a low dividend payout ratio. We have examined the two theories, that is Walter approaches and Gordon approaches under the theory of relevance. First, Walter's approach. Professor Walter's approach supports the doctrine that dividend decisions are relevant and affect the value of the firm. Professor Walter's model is based on the relationship between firm's return on investment and the cost of capital, or the required rate of return, that is cost of capital A. So we have to consider two important things under Walter's model. One is return on investment, which is R, and one is cost of capital, which is K. So according to Professor Walter, if our return on investment is more than K, that means if R is greater than K, the firm earns a higher rate of return on its investment than the required rate of return, then the firm should retain the earnings. If R is more than K, the firm should retain the earnings. Such firms are called as growth firm, and the optimum payout ratio would be 0 in their case. Similarly, in case of declining firms whose return on investments are less than cost of capital, the shareholders would stand to gain if the firm distribute its earnings. For such firms, the optimum payout ratio would be 100%, and the firm should distribute the entire earnings as dividends. So if R is less than K, then the total earnings must be distributed among the shareholders. But in case of normal firms where return on investment are also equal to their cost of capital, means R is equals to K, the dividend policy will not affect the market value of shares, as the shareholders will get the same return from the firm as expected by them. For such firms, there is no optimum dividend payout ratio, and the value of the firm would not change with the change in dividend rates. But there are some assumptions in Walter's model also. Number one, the investment of the firms are financed through retained earnings. only and the farm doesn't use external sources of funds. Number two, the internal rate of return, that is small r, and the cost of capital small k of the farm as constant. Number third, earnings and dividends do not change while determining the value. Number four, the farm has a very long life. But as per Professor Walter, but a particular formula is given to find out the price of equity share. So P equals to D plus R into E plus D by K whole divided by K. Or we can simply convert this particular formula in another way, that capital P equals to D by K plus R into E minus D whole divided by K whole divided by K. So P equals to price of equity share, D equals to initial dividend per share, KE equals to cost of equity capital, small r equals to internal rate of return, and capital E equals to earning per share. So you can go through your books and illustrations. You find out it in a clear and clear cut way, and you should go through the formula properly, mock up the formula and put the formula and get the answer. Next, some criticisms of Walter's model. The basic assumption that as investments are financed through retained earnings only in seldom true in real world. Firms do raise funds by external financing. The internal rate of return, that is R, also doesn't remain constant. As a matter of fact, with increased investment, the rate of return also changes. The assumption that cost of capital will remain constant also doesn't hold good. As a firm's risk pattern doesn't remain constant, it is not proper to assume that cost of capital will always retain or remain as constant. So this is all about Walter's model or Walter's approaches. Now coming to the last category of theory of relevance, that is Gordon's approach. Myron Gordon has also developed a model on the lines of Professor Walter, suggesting that dividends are relevant and the dividend decision of the firm affects its value. His basis valuation model is based on the following assumptions. Number one, the firm is an all equity firm, means the firm is always having only equity share capital, no preference shares and no debt. Number two, no external financing is available or used. Retained earnings are only source of finance. The rate of return on a firm's investment, that means small r, is always constant. Number four, the retention ratio small b is also constant. So the growth rate of the firm, that is z, small g equals to br, is also constant. Number five, the cost of capital of the firm remains constant and is greater than the growth rate, that is small k is greater than br. Number six, the firm has perpetual life. And number seven, corporate taxes do not exist. So these are the various assumptions we must have to follow while doing Gordon's approaches. So according to Gordon, the market value of the share is equal to the present value of future stream of dividends. That is, under Gordon's basic valuation formula can be simplified that capital P equals to E into 1 minus P whole divided by K minus BR, or P0 equals to D1 by K minus G, or equals to D0 into 1 plus G whole divided by K minus G, where P equals to price of shares, E equals to earning per share, B equals to small b equals to retention ratio, K equals to cost of equity capital, BR equals to Z, that is growth rate, that is rate of return on investment, D0 equals to dividend per share at the beginning of the year, and D1 equals to expected dividend at the end of the year. And while discussing these particular formulas, you should go through your book properly. After seeing this particular video, always compare the video with textbooks. Then only it will be very much clear. But now the implications of Gordon's basic valuation model may be summarized as: number one, when our return on investment is more than the cost of capital, that is, if R is more than K, the price per share increases as the dividend payout ratio decreases. So growth firms should distribute smaller dividends and should retain maximum earnings. Number two, when the return on investment are also equals to our cost of capital, the price per share remains unchanged and is not affected by dividend policy. So for a normal firm, there is no optimum dividend payout. And thirdly, when our rate of return on investment are less than our cost of capital, the price per share increases as the dividend payout ratio increases, and then the shareholders of declining firm stand to gain if the firm distributes its earnings. For such firms, the optimum payout would be 100%. So this is all about Gordon's model. But Gordon's model is also in a revised form, which is Gordon's revised model. The basic assumption in Gordon's basic valuation model that the cost of capital means K remains constant for a firm is not true in practice. So Gordon revised his basic model to consider risk and uncertainty. In the revised model, he suggested that even when our return on investment are also equals to cost of capital, means R equals to K, the dividend policy affects the value of shares on account of uncertainty of future shareholders discount future dividends at a higher rate than the discount near dividends. That is, there is a twofold assumptions, that is, investors are risk averse and they put a premium on a certain return and discount or penalize uncertain returns. Because the investors are rational and they want to avoid risk, they prefer near dividends and future dividends. Stockholders often act on a principle that a bird in hand is worth than two in the bushes, and for the reason are willing to pay a premium for the stock with a higher dividend rate. Just as the discount the one with the lower rate. Thus, if dividend policy is considered in the context of uncertainty, the cost of capital cannot assume to be constant, and so firms should set a high dividend payout ratio and offer a high dividend yield in order to minimize its cost of capital. So this is all about Gordon's revised model. So these are the various dividends theories, that is theory of irrelevances and theory of relevances. Under theory of irrelevances, we are residual approaches and Modigliani and Wheeler approaches. But under theory of relevance, we should have Walter's model and Gordon's model, and Gordon's basic model, Gordon's revised model. So these are all about our dividend theories. Now coming to another segment of this particular unit, that is determinants of dividend policy. The payment of dividend involves some legal as well as financial considerations. So the important factors which determine the dividend policy of the firm are: number one, legal restrictions. So legal provisions relating to dividends in the Companies Act 2013 laid down a framework within which the dividend policy are to be formulated. Number two, magnitude and trend of earnings. As dividends can be paid only out of the present or past year's profits, earnings of the company fix the upper limits on dividends. Number three, desire and type of shareholders. Desires of shareholders for dividends depend upon their economic status. Investors such as retired persons, widows, and other economically weaker persons view dividends as a source of funds to meet their day-to-day living expenses. Number four, nature of industry. Certain industries have a comparatively steady and stable demand irrespective of their prevailing economic conditions. For instance, people used to drink liquor both in boom as well as in recession. Such firms expect regular earnings and hence can follow a consistent dividend policy. On the other hand, if the earnings are uncertain, as in the case of luxury goods, conservative policies should be followed. Number five, age of the company. The age of the company also influences the dividend decisions of a company. Number six, future financial requirements. The management of a concern has to reconcile the conflicting interests of the shareholders and those of the company's financial needs. If a company has highly profitable investment opportunities, it can convince the shareholders of the need for limitation of dividend to increase the future earnings. Number seven, economic policy. The dividend policy of the firm has also to be adjusted to the economic policies of the government, as was the case when the temporary restriction on payment of dividend ordinance was in force. Number eight, taxation policy. The taxation policy of the government also affects the dividend decisions of the firm. A high or low rate of business taxation affects the net earnings of the company after tax and thereby its dividend policy. Number nine, inflation. Inflation acts as a constraint in the payment of dividends. When prices rise, funds generated by depreciation would not be adequate to replace fixed assets, and hence to maintain the same assets and capital intact, substantial part of the current earnings would be retained. Otherwise, imaginary and inflated book profits in the days of rising prices would amount to payment of dividends much more than warranted by the real profits out of the equity capital, resulting in erosion of capital. Number 10. Control objectives. As in the case of high dividend payout ratio, retained earnings are insignificant and the company will have to issue new shares to raise funds to finance its future requirements. The control of existing shareholders will be diluted if they cannot buy the additional shares issued by the company. Number 11. Requirements of institutional investors. Dividend policy of a company can be affected by the requirements of institutional investors such as financial institutions, banks, insurance corporations, etc. These investors usually favor a policy of irregular payment, policy of regular payment of cash dividends, and suitable their own terms with regard to payment of dividend on equity share. Number 12. Stability of dividends. Stability of dividends simply refers to the payment of dividend regularly, and shareholders generally prefer payment of such regular dividends. Some companies follow a policy of constant dividend per share, while others follow a policy of constant payout ratio, and while there are some others who follow the policy of constant low dividend per share plus an extra dividend in the year of high profits. And finally, last but not the least, liquid resources. The dividend policy of the farm is also influenced by the availability of liquid resources. Although a farm may have sufficient available profits to declare dividends, yet it may not be desirable to pay dividends if it doesn't have sufficient liquid resources. If a company doesn't have liquid resources, it is better to declare stock dividend, that is, issue of bonus shares to the existing shareholders at free of cost. The issue of bonus shares also amounts to distribution of farm's earnings among the existing shareholders without affecting its cash position. So these are all about various determinants of dividend policy. Now coming to one more segment, that is types of dividend policy. Number one, regular dividend policy. Payment of dividend at the usual rate is termed as regular dividend policy. Number two, stable dividend policy. The term stability of dividends means consistency in the stream of dividend payments. In more precise term, it means payment of certain minimum amount of dividend regularly. Next, irregular dividend policy. Some companies follow irregular dividend policies of payments on account of following uncertainty of earnings, unsuccessful business operations, and lack of liquid resources. And number four, no dividend policy. A company can follow a policy of paying no dividends presently because of its unfavorable working capital position or on account of requirements of future funds and expansion and growth. These are all about various types of dividend policy. Now coming to one more part, which is forms of dividends. What are the forms of dividends that is to be paid by the company to the shareholders? Dividends can be classified in the various forms. Dividends paid in the ordinary course of business are known as profit dividends, while dividends paid out from the capital are known as liquidation dividends. A dividend which is declared between two annual general meetings is called interim dividend, while the dividend recommended to the shareholders at the annual general meeting is called final dividend. So classification in the basis of medium, that is first one is cash dividend. Cash dividend is a usual method of paying dividends. Payment of cash results in outflow of funds and resources, the company's net worth, though the shareholders get an opportunity to invest the cash in any manner they desire. This is why the ordinary shareholders prefer to dividend in cash. Number two, scrip or bond dividend. A scrip dividend promises to pay the shareholders at a future specific date. In case a company doesn't have sufficient funds to pay the dividends in cash, it may issue notes or bonds for the amount due to the shareholders. Third, property dividend. Property dividends are paid in the form of some assets other than cash, are distributed under exceptional circumstances, are not popular in India. And finally, stock dividend. It means the issue of bonus shares to the existing shareholders at free of cost. If a company doesn't have liquid resources, it is better to declare stock dividend. Stock dividend amounts to capitalization of earnings and distribution of profits among the existing shareholders without affecting the cash position of the firm. This has been discussed in bonus issue. Already I have explained bonus issue in corporate accounting. So Stock dividend is also known as bonus issue of shares. So this is all about our dividend policies, theories and decisions. This is all about today's deliberation. Hope you all are well and safe. Your family, friends, relatives all are well and safe in this pandemic COVID-19 situation. Always use masks, use hand sanitizers without having any emergencies. Should not go to outside. So many all the best and best of luck for your upcoming exams and happy reading and best wishes. Thank you. Goodbye.